What's a 60-40 portfolio going to do going forward? Anyone who recommends a 60-40 portfolio, 60 being stocks, 40 being bonds, you need to ask, what is that portfolio going to do going forward? And then you need to be quiet and let them answer. If they said historically that portfolio has done X, Y, Z, you need to run for the hills. Why? Because it doesn't matter historical numbers when it comes to bonds. And a 60-40 portfolio, inherently 40% is going to be in bonds. So if they're saying historically a 60-40 portfolio did this, I don't care. We need to figure out how you do it. So what you do, well, for simplicity, we're going to say 10% for stocks. I don't use 10% stocks. I use 7.5, but I don't know how to do the calculation in my head. So 10% for stocks, we times 10 times 0.6. That gives us 0.6, all right? 10 times 0.6 gives us 0.6. Why are we doing it by 0.6? Because that's 60% of a 60-40 portfolio. And for simplicity, we're going to say 5% on bonds. So we take 5 times 0.4, because 40% of a 60-40 portfolio will be in bonds. So 10 times 0.6 is 6. 5 times 4.4 times 5 times 0.4 is 2. So 6 plus 0.6 plus 0.2 is 8%. That's what we'll get in our 60-40 portfolio if we get 10% stocks, 5% bonds. We're not getting 5% bonds anymore. We're not. I'm using 3%, and I'm probably going to adjust that downward here a little bit, but it's still 3%. So in that case, we'd take our 40% of the portfolio, 0.4, and we'd times that by 3, which would give us 1.2. So in that case, just with the bonds being 3%, which is kind of high right now anyway, but we'll go with it for just a second. The 10% stocks, we'd say 1.2 on the bonds, and we already said the stocks were 6, so we'd only have a 7.2% return. So we'd have a 10% less rate of return than we had before, just because the bonds are only giving us 3%. Because it was an 8% return, now it's a 7.2% return. That's 80 basis points. 80 basis points divided by 8, which is what the initial return is. That's a 10% decline. And now we got to go back and say, I don't think we're going to get 10% stocks. We're going to get, we're going to say 7 for the time being, because I can't figure out 7.5. So 7 times 0.6, again 0.6, because 60% of the portfolio is in stocks. So 7 times 0.6 is, was that 4.2? So 4.2 plus 1.2 on the bonds is a 5.4% rate of return on a 60-40 portfolio. And I'm using a little bit more than that because I'm giving 7.5% on the stocks, but still, we'll just say 5.5% is what you're getting on a 60-40 portfolio in my calculation. So we'll go back to what my man was saying here, the annuity slayer, who said, oh, your annuities are evil! Evil! He didn't say that, but he said, I'm a commission salesman, I'm making commissions off annuities. Okay, whatever. And then he said, you can do better than a fixed annuity with a 60-40 portfolio. Now, you might do better, but again, you've got to ask, what is that based on? And you got to let them talk, because again, if it's based on historical performance, you're not getting historical performance in bonds. Bonds are so easy to forecast for performance. It's your current yield. That's it, your current yield. No more, no less. It could be a little bit less if the bonds go bankrupt. So if your current yield is 3, that's what you're going to get, man. You're getting 3%. Bonds are no different than CDs or fixed annuities, not fixed indexed annuities. You know, I start with 1,000, I end with 1,000. As long as the bond doesn't go bankrupt, what did I get in between? I got 3%. That's the coupon or your current yield. If you buy it after issue date, it doesn't matter. That's what you get. I don't get why this is so hard for these guys. So what happens is the annuity slayer is sitting there thinking a 60-40 portfolio could do better than a fixed annuity. And I was using my fixed annuity as an example as 5%, just to throw it out there. We're not getting 5% fixed annuities today. I get that, but I was just using that. And he's saying your 60-40 portfolio could do better than that. Well, historically, that was true. Historically, 60-40 portfolio gave you roughly 8% or maybe 7.5%, something like that. That is true. But why are we projecting that going forward? And the answer is you can't. You cannot make those projections going forward. It's not just the annuity slayer, my friends. It's anybody who says, I'm going to recommend a 60-40 portfolio, 70, I don't even care what their portfolio mix is. They're saying, don't just say what did it do, just please, don't just say what it do in the past. I mean, that's fine, but that's irrelevant. Say what do you expect it to do in the future? Your ER, expected rate of return. I would say your ROR, rate of return. It's just expected return is what it is. So you can say EROR, expected rate of return. I think that's a safe. I think if you're going to weed out financial advisors, that's a wonderful quiz to ask them. What's your expected rate of return going forward? And they say 8%. Say, how you getting that? And I think that's I think it's a very good question to ask. Is how exactly are you getting that 8%? And make that person mathematically show it to you. This isn't hard to do. It's hard to do if you don't know what you're talking about. It's not hard to do if you do know what you're talking about. Now, if someone's going to say we expect an 8% rate of return because we expect, I don't know, 6% bonds because that's what they historically have averaged, I'd say, how do you get that? What's the current yield on bonds? It's not that. I mean, nowhere near that. Well, the interest rates have got to go up. I said, really? So, I mean, that's a different question to ask. I said, really? I mean, someone can make that argument, but I'd say they're not there now. And so for interest rates to go back up to, again, a 5 or 6% bond, that means they have to double. How long is it going to take for that to happen? And then, you see what I'm saying? So just, look, man, you got to throw it out the gauntlet. Say, all right, you're saying this is going to happen as your expected rate of return. A, if they do say that. B, how are you getting that? And then C, say, really? I mean, because they might be saying 8% rate of return. And I'd say, how? How do you do that with a bond? And don't even say, how do you do that with a bond? Just say, how do you do that? How do you get that? And let him tell you. And if he says, we think we can get 12% stocks, I say, really? If he says we can get 8% bonds or 6% bonds, I say, really? Why? Why do you think that? The price-to-earnings ratios are still high. I mean, they're not high relative to the bond yields, but that's why the bond yields are so low, because the equivalent of a PE ratio of a bond is incredibly high, incredibly pricey. So how someone expects to get at similar rate of return on a bond relative to historical norms, I don't get. And I'd even argue how someone expects to get that similar rate of return on stocks relative to high price valuations, I don't get either. So that's what you do when someone's saying, I think the 60-40 portfolio can beat this or beat that. Say, how are you getting that? And that's what you got to do. All right, we'll see you.